That's a whole other story. A Christian aesthetic glimpses the beauty of the world and the pain of the world and the fact that the world is going to be redeemed but isn't fully yet, and embodies that. Actually, the Angel of the North, if you know it, up in my part of the world, does a bit of that. It's both very beautiful, very evocative, quite painful because of all the post-industrial memories, etc., but full of promise. Very interesting piece of art. Do you have an equivalent in Manchester? Maybe you should hire what's-his-name to do one.
We do have one, but it fell down.
You can tell me about that later. I've listed 5 puzzles so far: democracy, world politics, global economy, climate change, aesthetics, the puzzle of gender and sexuality. I talked about that later. Shot through so many of these issues. We're all in a state about it. The problem of terrorism, the issues of life and death, abortion, human cloning, euthanasia, assisted dying if you want. And then ninthly, the impact of new technologies on being human, where a whole generation is growing up for whom human communication means Facebook and Twitter. And very occasionally you might have face-to-face communication, but it's a bit scary, so back off and do it on a keyboard instead. That's actually, in terms of the, I kid you not, in terms of the brain formation of children, that's actually a very, very serious question. Are they learning the arts of interfacing, literally, instead of metaphorically? And in and through all of these, caught between modernism, postmodernism, Gnosticism, empire, the task of the church is to be the people who have this hope that I've been spelling out, living in this world that I've just described, a vision of humanness and justice and mercy. And all our governments can say is, oh dear, there's some problems out there, let's make more regulations, let's give you more boxes to tick, and then it'll be all right. Well, it may mean you don't get sued, that isn't definite either. But the Christian vision is about grace, not law. It's about virtue, not regulation. It's about Jesus, not Caesar, with all the differences that goes with that. So the challenge to the church is to be the witness in and to this culture and to the individuals who are caught by it and crushed by it. A gospel ministry at every level. And yes, our resources often seem to be shrinking. God's hand isn't shortened. It's easy to say that. My diocesan budget is as much of a mess as yours and probably more. In fact, I'm pretty sure much more. We're a very, very poor diocese, and we wrestle with that. Yes, we have internal divisions. Yes, some of us are off to General Synod in a couple of days' time, and we're thinking, what on earth are we going to do and how are we going to get around this corner? And I mean, these are hugely important issues, don't get me wrong, but I sometimes think that these are displacement activities. We go on and on and on and on, debate it again and again, whatever it is, because we haven't actually got the guts to look at the big things and see what should we be doing about them. And yes, my position on women bishops, etc., is well known. I don't back off from that. I just think, let's get all the thing together. But we need to learn how to interpret the present time. It's not rocket science. Luke 12, Jesus says, you know how to do primitive weather forecasts. If there's a wind coming from the south, it's going to be hot. Well, in the Middle East, yeah, if the wind's coming from the south, of course it's going to be hot. Yeah, you do not need a PhD in global weather forecasting in order to figure that one out. And likewise, when we're bailing out bankers, when we're euthanizing old people, when we're colluding with the empire, we have this imbalanced treaty with the US where we can't extradite our citizens from them, but they can extradite, etc. We're just colluding. Where we are being drawn into illegal and immoral wars, we are called to be kingdom people, to be resurrection people, to be Jesus people in the middle of that. And so we have to plan. Yes, I know I said yesterday, forget your plans. Well, a word about that. Luke 14. Jesus warned about people who try and go to war having not calculated and done the sums whether they're going to do it or not. Or somebody tries to build a tower but hasn't figured out yet whether they can actually complete it or not. Now, no doubt again and again, as with Luke 24, we may hope and plan and pray and work, and then God reserves the right to do it differently. But I honestly believe that when that happens, we will look back and say, actually, this was what we were planning and praying and hoping for, even though it now takes a new form. And the fact that that may well be a surprise doesn't excuse us from the hard. After all, think of the beginning of Luke, of Simeon and Anna. They were perhaps not expecting this little baby boy to be the hope of Israel, but they were there faithful. They had done the thinking, they had done the planning, and above all, they had done the praying. And then now, here it is. This is the moment. And I know that there's a famous saying, and people often quote it, if you want to make God laugh, tell him your plans. But I want to say, if you want to make God weep, tell him you haven't got any. Planning isn't everything. Not planning isn't anything. What are we, humans or are we mice? God has given his gifts of wisdom. And are we going to bury them in the ground and hope it'll all be all right because we're a bit afraid of actually thinking things through? Proverbs 16, a wonderful opening of Proverbs 16, which I'm sure you know. The plans of the mind belong to mortals, but the answer of the tongue is from the Lord. And so you might think, oh, well, that's all right. There's no point in planning because God's going to do it anyway. Next verse, all one's ways may be pure in one's own eyes, but the Lord weighs the spirit. And then verse 3, commit your work to the Lord and your plans will be established. Prayer, planning, planning, prayer. Not an either or. They belong together. Joseph in Egypt, he read the signs. He had the vision. He saw what was going to need to be done. So he planned, he prepared, spent those 7 years collecting the corn. Little known to him, that famine was going to be the means by which his brothers and his father would come and be reunited. God did more abundantly than he had planned or imagined, but he had to do the planning.